Putin.
What does it take to become a hero of the Russian Federation? It's the highest honor the country can bestow. Usually it's for soldiers in battle or cosmonauts who brave the stars. But in 2015, the award was secretly given to this woman, a Czech citizen, the friendly owner of a beautiful holiday hotel in Greece. And she didn't get it for her hospitality, she got it for helping blow up a NATO country from the inside. Hi, I'm Christo, an investigative journalist. This is episode 5 of our series on Unit 29155, a top-secret GRU team behind anything from explosions and poisonings across Europe. In the last episode, we explored how Unit 29155 blew up arms depots in Czech and Bulgaria to disrupt weapons flow to Russia's adversaries in the region. We explained how they orchestrated the attacks, often traveling under fake identities and using remote detonation systems to trigger massive explosions. But even after we published our findings, there was one detail that kept nagging at us. It had to do with the 2014 bombing in Vrbice, Czechia. The destroyed warehouses belonged to a company called Imex Group. And to get inside the Imex Group factory, the GRU operatives needed access. Someone had to let them in. They needed an insider. 2 members of Unit 29155, using fake aliases, had been granted access to visit the warehouses around the time of the bombing. Why they wanted access was clear. It would have helped them identify the targets and maybe plant the devices. But why they had decided to formally request access, and why the access had been so swiftly granted, still wasn't clear to us at the time. Did they bribe somebody on the inside, or better, did they have a cooperating contact at Imex Group, the company that managed the warehouses? The answer led us to one of the most remarkable spy stories that I've ever uncovered. A story of deep-cover Russian illegals who spent decades building the perfect cover, only to use it to facilitate mass destruction across Europe. Now, to understand this story, you first need to understand some of the different types of operatives that Russian military intelligence, the GRU, utilizes overseas and how they interact with one another. First, there are spies under diplomatic cover. GRU spies masquerading as consular officers, cultural attachés, diplomatic careers. They're protected by diplomatic immunity, and every country has those. Thus, they are assumed to be legal spies. Then there are the illegals, spies who do not have diplomatic cover and are technically in breach of the laws of the country they are operating in. The illegals come in 3 different flavors. First, there are deep-cover Russian illegals, Russian agents posing as foreigners for years or even decades, normal people living normal suburban lives in the host country. If you watch the show The Americans, or better yet, our own series on the prisoner swap, you know that these illegals can pose as anything from journalists to professors to art gallery owners to travel agency owners. This type of spies is unique to the Soviet Union and now to Russia. Then there are the hybrid illegals. Unlike the traditional illegals, they don't pretend to be someone else altogether. They are Russians who have achieved naturalized citizen status in the host country and have built decades worth of a cover story, either as economic or political immigrants, for example, running away from the Soviet Union that they hate. You may remember the flamboyant and redhead spy Anna Chapman, who was swapped in the big spy swap in 2010. She was a typical example of a hybrid. Then there are the short-term illegals. These are GRU operatives, like the members of Unit 29155. They're militarized agents conducting direct sabotage activities and poisoning missions under fake identities. They use their fake aliases, usually as non-existent Russians or other former USSR citizens, to travel in and out of Russia for short periods of time. Up until this point, we viewed these operations as separate, with deep cover spies not engaging so directly with the in-field short-term operatives. But the further we dug into this story, the more we realized for the first time that this might not be the case. In the last episode, we revealed that Mishkin and Chepiga, the same operatives who were involved in the Salisbury poisoning, were also involved in the explosions in Vrbice, Czechia. But this time they were using different fake identities, Ruslan Tabarov and Nikolai Popa. Czech authorities had released information that it was Mishkin and Chepiga, using these fake identities, who had formally requested to visit the warehouses just days before they were blown up. We weren't sure exactly what that visit was used for, or whether it even happened, whether they showed up at the site at the allotted time. But the request itself was interesting for two reasons. First, it confirmed to us that Unit 29Wi-Fi 5 was trying to get access to that site. This was useful when we were first starting our investigation. It validated our hunch that they were not there randomly. They really wanted to get access to that place that was bombed up. Second, it pointed us to specific IMEX employees to look into. The investigation by the Czech authorities released internal IMEX group email records surrounding the request. And from that we could see that the request was sent by none other than Andrei Averianov, the head of Unit 29Wi-Fi 5. It was sent to an IMEX employee named Petr Bernatic Jr. In fact, he's the son of the company's owner. As it turns out, and as we can see from email records, Petr didn't just accept or deny that request and move on. Instead, he forwarded it to another employee within IMEX as soon as it was filed, almost as if he knew that there was some unique importance to that message. When Czech investigators pulled Petr's phone records around that time, they found that not only was the request forwarded immediately, but he also made a call to that other IMEX employee immediately before and right after forwarding the email request. That man's name was Nikolai Shaposhnikov. But who was he? On paper, he was just another IMEX employee. Someone who scouted sales opportunities and provided consultancy to international customers. However, when we began investigating his background, something interesting emerged. Nikolai Shaposhnikov wasn't just a mid-level Czech arms dealer. He was a former Soviet military commander who had fought in Afghanistan, served in Czechoslovakia during the Warsaw Pact era, and somehow transformed himself into a Czech citizen. According to Czech immigration records we obtained, Shaposhnikov's path to citizenship was built on a foundation of lies. In 1991, as the Soviet Union was collapsing, he showed up at a police station in the Slovak town of Zvolen, claiming political asylum. What was his story? He had been expelled from the Communist Party for repeated embezzlement of gasoline and batteries from the army. That was a believable dissident narrative. But the documents he submitted were riddled with forgeries. He claimed to be born to a family of clerks, not military officers. A lie. In fact, he hid his entire military career, including his command role in Afghanistan. Additionally, he hid the fact that he had a daughter from a previous marriage and even forged a birth certificate for his stepson, Pavel, making it appear as if he was the biological father. Nikolai seemed to be using his asylum application as an opportunity to reinvent himself and his past. As we began to uncover Nikolai's checkered past in our investigations, more questions about his true role at IMEX Group started to emerge. Was he really just a simple IMEX employee? If so, why was he receiving these forwarded requests? Furthermore, why was he so intricately involved in the approval process of visitors to the facilities? Naturally, as we grew more intrigued by the unusual background of Nikolai Shaposhnikov, we began to also look into his wife, Elena. As it turns out, Elena Shaposhnikov's past was also quite suspicious. Her asylum application, similar to Nikolai's, was based on the self-proclaimed basis of being a persecuted Soviet dissident. She claimed that she had surrendered her Ukrainian passport when she was granted asylum in 1992. But we could see that she repeatedly used that very passport to travel into Russia and into Ukraine, even after getting asylum in Czechia. It was a surprising travel pattern to see, since those were supposed to be countries where she faced persecution. But despite all these red flags, both Elena and Nikolai managed to obtain Czech citizenship. Nikolai got his in 1999, but Elena's case was less simple. It took her at least 6 attempts, and she only succeeded in 2004, with the involvement of Stanislav Gross, Prague's then interior minister, who was notorious for corruption. In her immigration file, we even found a handwritten note attached by an immigration officer. It read, "A red line running through this entire application dossier has been the various people constantly trying to intervene to achieve a positive outcome." A bit odd for an asylum seeker to have so many powerful people advocating for the approval of her citizenship, unless there was of course a larger reason to force it through. By all accounts, this doesn't seem like it was a bureaucratic incompetence case. This was a coordinated intelligence operation with many helpers along the way. By the early 2000s, the Shaposhnikovs had successfully embedded themselves in Czech society. Nikolai joined IMEX Group ostensibly as a business development executive. By 2012, both their daughter Valeria and his stepson Pavel were working for the company as well. From the outside, it looked like Elena was earning money by running her own operation, a company that claimed to import and export pig iron from former Soviet republics. In reality, after the investigation into the Verbatice depot explosions in 2014, Czech police found that she was actually intimately involved in IMEX's own operations, and even seemed to be directly supervising her own husband's activities. And here's when it gets almost like a spy novel. I mean, really interesting. The findings of a years-long investigation conducted by Czech Intelligence Center for Counterterrorism and Organized Crime into the Sapochnikov's activities showed that despite Nikolai's modest salary of around $650 a month from IMEX, the family was living far beyond their means. They owned real estate in both Czechia and Greece worth hundreds of thousands of euros. Elena controlled offshore accounts in Switzerland and a company registered in the Marshall Islands. Czech investigators discovered that their total income was barely enough to cover only their phone bill for a month. So where was this money coming from? We found the likely answer when we analyzed travel data around Unit 295's operations that we had been tracking. In 2009, the Sapochnikovs purchased a sprawling villa on the Greek peninsula of Chalkidiki for 275,000 euros, about $300,000 at the time. Elena claimed that she funded it with money from my parents, quite a remarkable feat for a retired couple living on Ukrainian pensions of under $300 a month. The Sapochnikovs named that villa Villa Elena and began operating it as a hotel, but this was no ordinary vacation rental. Using the same border crossing databases that had helped us track Unit 29155 operatives across Europe, we made a startling discovery. As soon as the Sapochnikovs took ownership in 2010, members of the unit began traveling to the nearby port city of Thessaloniki. The Greek villa provided the perfect cover. It was a legitimate business with a paper trail of real guests and reviews on booking sites. Even I tried to check myself into that villa, but it was busy for the foreseeable future. It also offered complete privacy, sprawling grounds, and most importantly, a location just 1 hour's drive from Thessaloniki's international airport. A clear pattern was developing. Members of Unit 29155 would arrive in Thessaloniki to coordinate and regroup before and after key operations across Europe. General Andrei Averyanov himself, the founding commander of the unit, whom we featured in several of our last episodes, traveled to Thessaloniki under his cover identity of Andrei Overyanov in July 2013. Phone metadata showed that he stayed in the vicinity of Villa Elena for a full week. But that was not his only visit to that vacation rental. He returned again in August 2014, just months before the Verbatice bombings. At least 4 other Unit 29155 members made similar trips between 2012 and 2018. Some of these visits coincided perfectly with operations we already knew about, like the poisoning of Bulgarian arms dealer Emilian Gebrev, which we covered in episode 2 of our series. For instance, Unit 29155 member Alexei Kapinos, whom the Sapochnikovs described to investigators as a family friend, flew to Thessaloniki on a diplomatic passport on April 25, 2014. Villa Elena wasn't just a hotel, it was a safe house, a secure base of operations for Russia's most elite assassination and sabotage unit, where actual killers could blend into the crowd of unsuspecting guests and stunning waterfront views under the guise of a much-needed vacation. We obtained access to direct email communications between Elena Sapochnikova and General Averyanov that revealed the true scope of their operation. The emails showed that Sapochnikov's role was far beyond just providing accommodation. In July 2013, Averyanov wrote to Elena regarding plans for the IMEX arms depot sabotages. Very much we need a complete list of sought-after weapons platforms. 3 weeks later, Elena forwarded him a PDF file titled Aircraft FSA PDF, Ammunition FSA PDF, and Weapons FSA PDF, detailed intelligence about IMEX Group's weapons destined for the Free Syrian Army, a militia fighting Russian-backed Bashar al-Assad's regime. These files had been sent to Elena by her stepson Pavel, who also worked at IMEX. The GRU was therefore, as Czech investigators concluded, informed about the planned trade of munition between Bulgarian MCO and the Czech IMEX from the very beginning to the fiery end. Additionally, Elena specifically indicated which 2 Verbatice warehouses, number 16 and number 12, needed to be targeted for a successful operation. The Sapochnikovs weren't just facilitating access to and providing general information about the warehouses. They were providing the key intelligence that made the precise sabotage possible. Their continued coordination was meticulous. On September 26, 2014, just weeks before the Verbitice explosion, Averyanov emailed Elena, "I'm sending a request to visit the warehouses." 3 days later, Elena wished Andrusha, the diminutive form for Andrei, a happy birthday. They then made plans to meet in Portugal. On October 3rd, our travel data shows Averyanov, Nikolai, Elena and their daughter Valeria all met in Lisbon. A week later, the family was back in Czechia, where Nikolai met with Petr Bernatic Jr., the man who went on to forward the email facilitating access to the Verbitice warehouses. And that's when Averyanov sent the Photoshop passport scans from Mishkin and Chepiga to IMEX corporate email. The same day, the Shaposhnikovs met with Averyanov and his deputy at a hotel in Slovakia, just as other members of Unit 29 Wi-Fi 5 were converging on the Czech border. Within 72 hours, Warehouse 16 was destroyed, killing 2 IMEX employees instantly. This level of coordination revealed something we had never seen before: illegals, deep cover spies working directly with Unit 29 Wi-Fi 5's kinetic operations team. Traditionally, the GRU's illegal program, like the SVR-1, focuses on intelligence gathering, but the Shaposhnikovs represented something new, a hybrid operation combining long-term penetration with immediate tactical support for sabotage missions. In 2020, as we were publishing our findings about the depot bombings, Czech authorities reopened their investigation. What they found confirmed our worst fears about the Shaposhnikovs' central role in that operation. But we discovered something even more remarkable. Using leaked Russian government databases, the same kind of data breach that had helped us identify other members of Unit 29 Wi-Fi 5 before, we found that Elena Shaposhnikov possessed a secret Russian service passport from a special series reserved exclusively for members of the GRU, more specifically for members of Unit 29 Wi-Fi 5. She had used this passport to travel between Greece and Russia on at least 2 occasions, employing sophisticated tradecraft to avoid leaving digital footprints in European databases. Most remarkably, travel records showed that in December 2015, Elena made a 2-day trip to Moscow using that secret passport. It was during this visit that Vladimir Putin personally bestowed upon her the Hero of the Russian Federation award, the highest state honor usually reserved for extraordinary military valor. A naturalized Czech citizen running a Greek hotel had received Russia's highest honor for her role in sabotaging NATO allies. When Czech authorities finally confronted the Shaposhnikovs in 2021, the couple initially tried to maintain their cover. They claimed all of their connections to Unit 29 Wi-Fi 5 were personal or driven by legitimate business interest. They insisted that they didn't know Averyanov or Kapinos. They didn't know that they were members of what they called an internationally wanted state terrorist organization. But as investigators presented them with the evidence that we had helped uncover as well, emails, travel records, the financial transactions, the passport, the secret passport from the GRU range, their story kept changing. In 2023, Czech authorities declared them persons of interest and requested their extradition from Greece for questioning. The couple refused to travel to Prague. Instead, they submitted a statement through Greek authorities claiming that they were scapegoats being persecuted for their Russian heritage. In February 2024, Nikolai Shaposhnikov suddenly died of a heart attack in Greece, taking many secrets with him to the grave. Elena remains a person of interest, but the damage is already done. The Shaposhnikov's case revealed the true scope of Russia's hybrid warfare campaign against the West. This wasn't just about individual assassination attempts or isolated acts of sabotage. It was about building a persistent, embedded network capable of supporting sustained operations across Europe for decades to come. The Shaposhnikovs had spent decades building the perfect cover, integrating themselves into European society, only to use that access to facilitate mass destruction. They even had befriended Emilian Gebrev, the same person who their teammates were going to poison the following year. They even invited him to Villa Elena. He didn't go. But Villa Elena was just one node in the broader network. Our investigation revealed that Unit 29 Wi-Fi 5 maintained multiple safe houses and support networks across Europe, including one in Switzerland. That allowed them to operate with near impunity for years, something we'll disclose in future episodes. But in our next episode, we'll uncover their attempts to stage coups, manipulate elections, and destabilize democratic institutions. If you don't want to miss our next episode, like and subscribe.